So there's this thing going around on social media, and it's among, I guess, African Americans, and it's asking the question, "How old were you when a cop pulled a gun on you?" And it doesn't ask if a cop pulled a gun on you. It's just assuming that at some point, as an African American male, a gun was pulled on you. Now that may be a generalization, but it's funny because that question made me think about how old was I when a cop pulled a gun on me. And I was 16. I was on my way home from school. I was in the passenger seat. The driver, we were classmates, so we were the same age. And I believe there was one or two guys in the back seat. And we were just getting off of the expressway on our way home from practice. I believe it was football practice at the time. It was football season. We were on our way home from practice. And as soon as we get off the expressway, this car just swarms behind us, lights flashing. The cop gets out of the car, and all I hear just behind my head was, "Don't make it a murder. Don't make it a murder." And I had my hands up, and I slowly turned around, and I have this gun pointed in the window, just aiming at the back of my head. And unfortunately, although that was my first experience with a police officer, for some reason, I still felt it was not anything out of the ordinary. And this is on the south side of Chicago, and this was contrary to what people believe today. This was probably the most deadliest period of growing up in Chicago. And I was 16 during all of this. But it just felt like not odd. Now, fortunately for us, we weren't up to anything. We didn't have any weapons in the car, or we didn't have any reason to flee. And for some of you looking at this, you may say, well, that's why you were able to survive the incident, because you had nothing to hide. And that's not always true. Had I moved the wrong way, that cop probably would have killed me that day. Had I just turned around too quickly, that cop probably would have killed me that day. So I think about these young men who are unarmed or who are fleeing from police officers, and they're being shot down like animals. And it's a sad commentary that as a black community, you can post a question and instantly you're getting 15 to 20 responses giving the age they were when they first experienced a police pulling a gun out on them. People talk about defund the police, and they're against the whole movement to defund the police. Let me tell you what I think defund the police means. It's just my interpretation. Right now, our police departments are overfunded, and I'm not talking about necessarily salaries and pensions and things of that nature. I'm just talking about the military type training, the opening of new facilities, the putting more money into these officers, and the results are we were just becoming a community that's over-policed. So when you defund the police, you put the funds back into the black community, into educational opportunities, into economic growth, into financial literacy. Instead of making it as a prison state, let's promote self-help. Let's promote positive progress, because these young men who are growing up, and women who are growing up on the south side of Chicago, they're not experiencing the same police officers that a lot of these young men and women are experiencing in the more affluent suburbs. And it is a blatant lack of respect that a lot of law enforcement officers show to the black community. And it's no coincidence that a lot of them are being gunned down. I think it's 1 in 1,000 has a chance of being killed by a police officer. And that's way too many. You know, one is too many, and that is way too many, 1 in 1,000. So let's focus on developing these communities And I know you people who sit out there who probably never experienced this, you can point the finger, you can wag the finger, but when you run into a situation where you're doing nothing wrong and a gun is pulled out on you from the person who was supposed to be protecting your very life, it gives you mixed feelings. Now, I have relatives and very dear friends who are on the police force, and I support them wholeheartedly, and I support what they do, and I appreciate what they do to put themselves just in a line of fire on a daily basis. But that doesn't mean I support rogue cops. I don't support those guys. I can remember this. Growing up in the housing projects on the south side of Chicago, I can remember, for those of you out there who are not familiar with Chicago, in terms of gangs, is really big. So there are a lot of gang factions in Chicago. And it leads to a lot of violence because when you have gangs give these young men and women out there a sense of belonging. It's like they're part of the club. And in order to prove yourself as part of the club, you get involved in activities that are definitely detrimental to the entire community. But nonetheless, I grew up in a certain gang territory, and I remember a police officer driving by, and the ultimate sign of disrespect you can show to a gang member is to disrespect their gang. And in Chicago, you know, everything in terms of gangs, you throw it up. And if you're anti that gang, you throw it down, if that makes sense. And these are all hand gestures and whatnot. And I'm just trying not to get into too much detail about it. Nonetheless, I step out on my porch and there's cops driving by, and he throws the gang that's the big gang in my neighborhood. He throws that symbol down, and I'm the only one standing out there. And he drives by and he throws that symbol down in order to create a reaction out of me. So fortunately for me, I'm not in a gang. I didn't belong to a gang, and I was aware enough to just laugh at him. But there are some people who live and die by that gang, who live and die by those colors. Just like you people out there who are so adamant about our great American flag, it's the same feeling of pride a young man gets in belonging to a gang. Had I been one of those patriotic gang members, that would have set me off. And now I'm going into the neighborhood and now I'm angry. And instead of taking it out on that cop, I'm going to take it out on someone in the opposite gang. And that's how the cycle goes. You don't realize how much these police officers agitate the situations. And if you can't handle having a bad day as a police officer, find another job. There are more opportunities out there, but you cannot be a part of the problem. You cannot be a part of the cycle. And I have a buddy who is a police officer in more affluent neighborhoods. And he's told me the statistics reported are totally different based on area. A lot of things go on in certain neighborhoods are either not reported or underreported just to keep property values high. So for all of you out there pointing the finger to the ghettos, understand these statistics are not always accurate. But nonetheless, the point I'm making is this. Police brutality is a real thing. Cops agitating situations is a real thing. We have to take a moment to step back and figure out how do we get to the root of this problem. From my standpoint, I think it starts with economic development in these communities and showing these young men that there's more out there than being on the streets. We have to show them proud, black, successful business owners. We have to pump money into the ecosystem because they are the ones who are influenced by the ones that come before them. And if you have a person who you see driving the block and it looks like they're making a ton of money and they're making it quickly, you want to be like them. It's idol worshiping. But yet, the rest of America only points to the murder rate, and you don't understand the reasons behind that murder rate. And you don't understand how systemic racism goes into that murder rate. But like I said, I just wanted to come on and talk a little bit about my first experience with a police officer. Since then, I've had more, and like I say, I'm fortunate because I just feel like it's not worth it to go back and forth with the police officer. That doesn't mean that my way is the only way. I think if you're upset at something, if you have a problem with a cop pulling you over, you're very well within your right to express your displeasure. Because other cultures can do it without fear of being shot and killed. So there is no manual on how to address a police officer. And if a person is angry, there's no reason for them to pay with their life unless they are a visible, clear, and present threat. So anyway, that's my take. Make sure you comment below. Tell me your thoughts. If any of you out there have any stories about the first time a police officer pulled a gun on you, make sure you share it. And for those of you out there who don't understand, all I say to you is subscribe, keep the dialogue going, but in the end of the day, get to know us. Take care.